West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Up front tonight, the party of QAnon. Tonight, the Republican Party is doubling down and giving credence to a group that is a megaphone for dangerous and deadly conspiracy theories. Most of the 211 of House Republicans are silent tonight over Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's past comments supporting the execution of prominent Democratic politicians. Instead, Greene, a QAnon supporter, has been given a seat on the Education and Labor Committee. And that should alarm everyone, all of us. For one, she tried to make a name for herself by suggesting the 2018 massacre at the high school in Parkland, Florida was a false flag. In other words, a planned event to kill kids. And then posted this video in March 2019, where she is seen confronting a survivor of that shooting, student David Hogg.
David, why are you supporting the red flag laws? If Scott Peterson, the resource officer at Parkland, had done his job, then Nicholas Cruz wouldn't have killed anybody in your high school, or at least protected them. Why are you supporting red flag gun laws that attack our Second Amendment rights? And why are you using kids as a barrier? Do you not know how to defend your stance? Tell him walking. He's got nothing to say. Sad. He has nothing to say because there really isn't anything to say, you guys. He has nothing to say because he's paid to do this. Guess what? I'm a gun owner. I'm an American citizen. And I have nothing, but this guy with his George Soros funding and his major liberal funding has got everything. I want you to think about that. That's where we are. And he's a coward. He can't say one word because he can't defend his stance.
So that was Marjorie Taylor Greene going after a teenager who lost 14 classmates in a horrific school shooting. Tonight, in an unapologetic statement to CNN, she says, I was going from office to office in the Senate to oppose the radical gun control agenda that David Hogg was pushing. Well, now Greene has been validated by the Republican Party, promoted by the Republican Party, placed on an education committee. And that's not all there is from Greene, by the way. I just want to be clear. If you're not familiar with her, you should be familiar, given how she's being promoted now, with her extensive track record in the land of conspiracy.
It's odd. There's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon. There is an Islamic invasion into our government offices.
Never any evidence of a plane flying into the Pentagon. This person is now a sitting member of Congress with a position on the Education Committee, put there by Republican leadership. And then there's comments unearthed by our own K-File, comments like, quote, the stage is being set, players are being put in place, we must be patient. That comment responding to a comment about hanging former President Obama. And that comment actually forced the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to respond. Well, I want to be clear, actually, it was his spokesperson who responded. The spokesperson says, quote, these comments are deeply disturbing and Leader McCarthy plans to have a conversation with the Congresswoman about them. Well, we don't know when that conversation is going to happen. maybe McCarthy is putting it off until he's back from Florida because he's heading there tomorrow to meet with former President Trump. Perhaps he's still trying to make up to get back in Trump's good graces because, remember, he blamed Trump for the deadly insurrection and then backtracked and said that his comments had nothing to do with it. So while McCarthy's office calls Greene's comments deeply disturbing, the House Minority Leader is about to go and meet with a former president who, by the way, has not only embraced QAnon, but also Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, right here from Northwest Georgia. Oh, boy, I don't want to mess with her. No, she's great.
This one, I never, ever want to have her as my enemy. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Where is she? She is so unbelievable.
Also joining us tonight are Georgia representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene. I love Marjorie.
So Trump says he loves Marjorie. Then Trump and Greene are also in lockstep when it comes to the lie that Trump told the world, right? The lie that inspired his followers to attack the U.S. Capitol.
Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country. We won in a landslide. This was a landslide.
We aren't going to let this election be stolen by Joe Biden and the Democrats. President Trump won by a landslide.
The Republican Party right now is the party of Trump, and Trump's big lie about the election being stolen is a core tenet of QAnon. And for those Republicans who want to still hope that this is just going to go away, it isn't. QAnon is not going anywhere. It's coast to coast. In Arizona, the Republican Party voted Saturday to censor Cindy McCain and two other prominent Republican officials because they crossed Trump. In Oregon, the state Republican Party is buying into the conspiracy theory that the Capitol riot was a false flag. In this case, false flag meaning an attack that was engineered by Trump's opponents to make him look bad. And in Virginia, the leading Republican gubernatorial candidate, Amanda Chase, who calls herself Trump in heels, said the attack on the U.S. Capitol was justified and said this about the rioters.
The people I met were patriots who love their country and drove from as far away as California to witness history, which they hope would be overturning of the election results.
This is the kind of thinking and talking that the Republican Party is embracing by its silence and by putting people who say the election was stolen on committees. And they're playing with fire. We all saw what happened at the Capitol. And now the Department of Homeland Security issuing a bulletin this week warning of more potential violence from domestic extremists who may be emboldened by that attack. Manu Raja begins our coverage live tonight on Capitol Hill. And Manu, you're getting some new details about a private conversation that Leader McCarthy, who, we know is heading to meet with Trump. We know, obviously, puts Greene on this committee, but a conversation that he just had with his members.
Yeah, and on that same call, Aaron, actually Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke up and made clear that she planned to donate to the Republican cause to take back the House majority to the tune of $175,000, I am told by multiple sources on the call, to give that money to the National Republican Congressional Committee, a sign how she is still welcome within the party, despite these disturbing comments that even the House Republican Leader's Office says these comments are disturbing and that he plans to have a conversation with her. Now, on the same call, McCarthy called out his members for attacking one another. Greene has been criticized by some fellow Republicans, including Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, who has urged his party not to follow the type of politics that Greene espouses. But and the other side, Republicans who are very close to Donald Trump, Trump defenders in the House Republican Conference, are going after Liz Cheney, the number 3 Republican, for her vote to impeach Donald Trump. She joined 9 Republicans to do just that over the charge that Donald Trump incited the insurrection that led to the deadly violence on Capitol Hill. McCarthy, I'm told from multiple sources, told his colleagues to, quote, cut that crap out. His argument was that they are focusing on each other, they're attacking each other over Twitter, and that effort will only undercut their efforts to take back the majority. Instead, he wants them to focus on Democrats. Whether that will work, though, Aaron, is still an open question. And how far he ends up taking it, also an open question. The man he's meeting with tomorrow, Donald Trump, is angry at the Republicans who voted to impeach him. Some of the former president's allies, including Matt Gaetz, traveling out to Wyoming to rally support against Liz Cheney. So whether he has any success in that remains to be seen, but it's a sign of the tension that's still building within this party. Aaron.
Right, certainly is. And, they're still the need that they feel to still show fealty to a man who is no longer president.
It is Thursday, the 28th of January of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life. Oh, one other thing. Milk in the grits, okay? Just, one might consider it to be a conceit. Others might consider it to be, a righteous command. Okay, well, what has happened to this country? What has happened? The Republican Party has turned into, a lot of people make the comparison to them in Jonestown, which is an apt comparison. But I think a much more apt comparison would be with the Rajneeshis. And if you don't remember who they were like he was the love guru. People loved him so much, they gave him money, and he had 3 or 4 dozen, and I'm not kidding. It's not hyperbole. 3 or 4 dozen Rolls Royces, a couple of Learjets. Had so much money, they pretty much bought a town in Oregon, in Wasco County, Antelope, the town of Antelope. Used to be an old stage and wagon stop. Wagon stop on the old Dulles, or the old trail in Dalles to get to the gorge. Anyway, they took over this town. And when I say take over, I mean they took over from 81 until 85. Just a few years, about as much time as we just experienced with a guy that, where's he getting his makeup now? Anyway, they took over this town and were pretty much then at war with the state and trying to take over the state. Why? Because they wanted their way. The love guru turned out to be more of let's put it this way. His followers turned out to be quite a few Nazis. There's no other way to put it. Was it about a master race? Well, fascism is fascism. So maybe Nazi is just, a nice little 2-syllable type thing. Well, fascism is too, sort of. Anyway, they were little petty tyrants. And it went so far that they, in their quest to take over this town, they went to the local Sizzler and, put a little bit of salmonella on the salad. Here, let's get sick. During a vote, they were trying to manipulate votes by getting people sick. Somebody died, and, that's not a good thing. And in the process, they then began trying to kill the U.S. attorney out of Portland and went to, any number of things that they tried to do to state officials. And, so it was quite a scandal, shall we say. Now, a lot of people go, Bhagwan Rajneesh, another brown guy. What do you expect? His ashram here were a lot of white people of means, and you would expect intelligence because they had gone to school and had certain levels of accomplishment. And yet, I don't know why, they were susceptible to a particular kind of brainwashing, shall we say. And I don't know if it's because of the Kundalini yoga practices or what, but something happened there. And now it's happening again. And that is embodied in one Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, Squeaky Berbert is in there too, okay? But this Marjorie Taylor Greene is getting a little bit of exposure, finally. Well, she actually has been seeking that exposure, and now we finally know who the hell she is. And who is she? Well, she's the Republican Party. She is the whole of the Republican Party. This is what the Republican Party has become. So in other words, when the DHS puts out a code, they have a color code for terror levels. This is MAGA hat red for domestic terror. And looks like the whole of the GOP are potential domestic terrorists, because they are quite vociferous in making sure that they know, that we know, that they are going to take over this country by any means necessary. Notice how they always take our rhetoric and turn it on to us. Yeah, like they're trying to say that we're hypocrites. Oh my God. Speaking of which, was it the New Yorker? I'm now drawing just from memory here, so and this was just had flashed across my transom. New Yorker, or was it the New York Times? Basically, swift boating John Kerry already. That he was like some sort of sad aristocrat, because before he married into the Heinz fortune, he was only making his like $133,000 salary in the government as a senator. Wow. Yeah, well, he did come from a fairly patrician background, and he did throw his medals away. Well, he threw them at the White House at Nixon, just so you know. What are you going to tell the last, swift boater who is basically swift boating based on a lie? What are you going to tell that man? Well, you're under arrest and you better go to jail, because if you don't, we're going to take you there anyway. So 120 so far, 150 so far, and that the Department of Justice, FBI, are going to bring to court. It should be a lot more, of course. They're so afraid. I don't know why. Maybe if you get all these white nationalists together in jail, it's going to get worse. Well, yeah, and then if you spread them out, it gets worse because you spread them out. And then they spread their infection everywhere they go. We do have our own Siberia. I'm just saying. We could, okay? But we won't. And we'll probably buy them Whoppers with cheese and, let them just get released into the custody of their moms. That seems to be the going judicial practice in this insurrection. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? It is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, and I assure you, I've been saying this for weeks, months. I will put recipes on the show notes and links diary. Okay, I will. Just kind of busy. Got mom, got the radio station, got my own writing that I'm trying to get done, and that I have to. I'm part of a group that we do those sorts of things on a regular basis, twice a week, actually. And so, yeah, a little busy, and I'll get it up there. I don't feel like clipping and pasting someone else's recipe. I need to sit down and, it's not that easy when they start having ratios of things that you have to figure out how to format. Okay? Just saying. But yes, it is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, and milk in the grits. Okay, here we are in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and a Montana man is facing a $9.9 million fine. Why don't they just say 10? I don't know. Journalism for you, I guess. But he's getting that fine for racist, anti-Semitic, and harassing robocalls. Well, it's about time. The Pentagon will now include the risk of climate change in the National Defense Strategy Report. Well, it's about time for that, too. And oceanic shark populations have dropped 71% since 1970. And in the greater scheme of things, that's not much time. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Moscow jail space is in short supply after massive anti-Putin protests. Yeah. And the U.S. charged a UK national in a bribery scheme to obtain Iraq reconstruction contracts. We're cleaning up and draining the swamp, and that is about time, too. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the right of the page there is our chat room link, and just go there. Go to the chat room. Kelly monitors it. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page, and go there and give us money. And why would you do that? Well, we need your help. We do a lot of this. Well, most of it comes out of our own wallets. It's more than a labor of love. It's almost a duty. Anyway, it's our constitutional and civic duty to do this. And you are helping us fulfill that, well, responsibility to our nation and our grandchildren, too. Truly. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send the funds from that once a month to us, we are able to stretch those dollars and pay our bills, fly under the radar, because, look, they use the old technology, okay? Even we could probably fly somewhere around, other technologies, maybe. But anyway, when you pay your bills, they usually let you get away with a lot of stuff, usually. Anyway, they've been letting us get away with a lot of stuff for almost 10 years, and that anniversary will be coming up. And we have you to thank and your generosity to thank for allowing us to do so for all this time. And thank you, truly, all kidding aside. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. And I take care of @Justice Putnam because that's me. Okay, I didn't make it up. It was bestowed upon me at birth. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast about 10 minutes before showtime. And go to those show notes and links because that's where the real story is, okay? Come on. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And do please pick up podcasts for not only this show, but all the Netroots Radio shows that we do at Netroots Radio, including the Musique Sans Frontières, the Justice Department, Musique Sans Frontières on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, pick up that podcast too. Anyway, you can pretty much pick all those up on Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube sometimes. Sometimes with YouTube. iTunes, YouTube, and iTunes, yeah. Well, iTunes, iHeart. They're all the same. Get them wherever you can get them because they're everywhere. Okay, nobody wrote this next story, and when I say nobody, I mean, anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press. They are somebody, I know. They just, on staff. Well, a Montana man is facing a $9.9 million fine. Come on, just say $10 million. Why do they do this? From the Federal Communications Commission, $9.9 million fine from the FCC after he sent racist, anti-Semitic, and harassing robocalls to tens of thousands of phones across 8 states. Scott D. Rhodes calls in 2018 targeted black and Jewish politicians, a journalist, an Iowa community grieving the killing of a college student, and the murder case against an avowed white supremacist who drove into a crowd in Charlottesville, Virginia. The Daily Interlake in Kalispell reported. They did. They reported it. The FCC announced the fine on January 14th and said Rhodes repeatedly violated the Truth and Caller ID Act by manipulating the calls to make them seem as if they came from local phone numbers. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened. Where we live, boy, they prey on old people like my mom who are not so technologically savvy. Ajit Pai, who stepped down as the FCC's chairman last week, said the law clearly bans spoofed robocalls used with the intent to defraud, cause harm, or cheat recipients, and that Rhodes calls marked new levels of egregiousness. Among many other things, the calls Rhodes sent included a recording of Adolf Hitler and directed listeners to his podcast, where he ranted about Jews, Muslims, and other people of color. Calls also went to Charlottesville, Virginia, conveying a baseless conspiracy theory about the death of a woman amid the murder trial of a white supremacist who drove into a crowd in 2017. Rhodes, age 51, this guy should have known better at that age, has been given 30 days to pay the fine. If he does not, the FCC said it could refer the case to the Department of Justice. I don't think this guy's got 10 mil. In his response to the commission's findings, he complained of politically motivated gross overreach of FCC authority. Rhodes did not immediately return an email requesting comment late on Tuesday. Idris Ali and Phil Stewart of Reuters bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Pentagon said yesterday, Wednesday, because today is Thursday. Okay, I hope I keep reminding myself that because I might forget. Anyway, it said it would include the risk of climate change and military simulations and wargaming. After President Joe Biden, boy, it sure feels nice to say that about a personage now, doesn't it? Finally. Well, Joe signed a raft of executive actions to tackle the climate issue. Biden's orders map out the direction for the Democratic president's environmental agenda. Why don't you just say he's the U.S. president? Okay, because that's what he is. And he is. So I'm just going to call him the U.S. president. There, I'm doing a little bit of editing for you guys because we can. And it marks a reversal from policies under his Republican predecessor. Oh, you mean the previous U.S. guy running the show. We can't really call him the P word even now. Anyway, that was Donald Trump, as if you didn't know, who sought to maximize U.S. oil, gas, and coal output by removing regulations and easing environmental reviews. Yeah, well, you know what? If everybody's dead, they don't spend their money, do they? Jeez, people are so stupid. Under Trump, the Pentagon's guiding document, known as the National Defense Strategy, did not include climate change as a priority because they all wanted to work around it and try to make as much money before the whole shithouse goes up in flames. Over the past decade, the U.S. military and intelligence officials have developed a broad agreement about the security threats that climate change presents, in part by threatening to cause natural disasters in densely populated coastal areas, damage American military bases worldwide, and open up new natural resources to global competition. Yeah, once it starts affecting a military base, especially one named after a rebel general, then they start wanting to do stuff. Biden's focus on climate change has cheered international partners and environmental advocates, but upset big oil. Well, you know, big oil used to be the whale oil industry, the big whale oil industry, and they were upset too when their industry was threatened and finally went away. And they argue that the moves will cost the U.S. millions of jobs and billions of dollars in revenue at a time when the U.S. economy has been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, you know what? Put them to work building batteries. Now for the seafood course here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Christina Larson brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe. When marine biologist Stuart Sandin talks about sharks, it sounds like he's describing Jedis of the ocean. They are terrific predators, fast swimmers, and they have amazing senses. They can detect any disturbance in the ocean from great distance, such as smells or tiny changes in water currents. Oh, really? Jedis? Their ability to quickly sense anything outside the norm in their environment helps them find prey in the vastness of the open ocean. But it also makes them especially vulnerable in the face of increased international fishing pressure, as global fishing fleets have doubled since 1950. You drop a fishing line in the open ocean, and often it's sharks that are there first, whether or not they're the primary target. Scientists have known for decades that individual shark species have been declining, but a new study drawing on 57 global data sets underscores just how dramatically worldwide populations have collapsed in the past half-century. Globally, the abundance of oceanic sharks and rays dropped more than 70% between 1970 and 2018, according to a study published yesterday, Wednesday, in the journal Nature. And 24 of the 31 species of sharks and rays are threatened with extinction, while 3 species, the oceanic white-tip sharks, scalloped hammerhead sharks, and great hammerhead sharks, are considered critically endangered. Sharks and rays are both fish with skeletons made of cartilage, not bone, in contrast to most other kinds of fish. They generally take several years to reach sexual maturity, and they produce fewer offspring. The number of fishing vessels trolling the open ocean has risen steeply since the 1950s as engine power expanded ships' range. And while climate change and pollution also imperil shark survival, increased fishing pressure is the greatest threat for every oceanic shark species. When you remove top predators of the ocean, it impacts every part of the marine food web, said Stuart Pym, an ecologist at Duke who was not involved in the study. Sharks are like lions, tigers, and bears of the ocean world, and they help keep the rest of the ecosystem in balance. Take out the top predator, there's some sort of weird balance that achieves, and nature doesn't care how it looks. Okay, that takes us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, because that's what we do. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Cattle are a common sight in Indian cities, but some end up in busy intersections and on highways, where they cause accidents and traffic jams.
From blocking traffic to damaging greens in residential colonies, untended cattle have become a nuisance in Delhi.
And the nuisance extends beyond Delhi.
All these problems is very intense in many Indian cities.
Atanu Pati studies animal behavior at Pandit Ravishankar Shukla University in Raipur, that's in central India. He and his colleagues wanted to find out just how many cows lived on the streets of Raipur. So they took a census. They divided the city into 163 grids, each consisting of 1 square kilometer. Then they randomly selected 20 of those grids and started counting.
We used 2 methods. One is a direct head count.
The other was photographic. They'd take pictures in those same grids over a few days and count the cows they may have missed. By studying those slices of the city, they extrapolated the bovine population of Raipur to be about 35,000, or at least 1 street cow for every 54 human residents. The details appear in the journal PLOS ONE. The researchers write that the cattle head count is a first step to, quote, mitigate the cattle menace on the street. Next, Pati says they'll share their findings with the city government. And since many of the cows do have owners who bring them in to milk, he said the city may try to encourage people to keep a tighter leash on their livestock.
This is one thing. And the other thing is that suppose the cows are ownerless, they don't have any owner, so then they will try to rehabilitate them in some places where they can provide food and everything.
He says they'll continue counting in other Indian cities, if they can rustle up the funding. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence the opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In a world that's clogged and choking with a massive overdose of plastic trash, you'll be heartened to learn that governments and industries are teaming up to respond forcefully to this planetary crisis. Unfortunately, their response has been to engage in a global race to make more plastic stuff and to force poor countries to become dumping grounds for plastic garbage. Leading this Kafkaesque greedfest are such infamous plunderers and polluters as ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and other petrochemical profiteers. With fossil fuel profits crashing, the giants are rushing to convert more of their oversupply of oil into plastic. But where to send the monstrous volumes of waste that will result? The industry's chief lobbyist outfit, the American Chemistry Council, looked around last year and suddenly shouted, "Eureka! There's Africa!" In particular, they're targeting Kenya to become a plastics hub for global trade in waste. However, Kenyans have an influential community of environmental activists who've enacted some of the world's toughest bans on plastic pollution. To bypass this inconvenient local opposition, the dumpers are resorting to an old corporate power play: free trade. Their lobbyists are pushing an autocratic trade agreement that would ban Kenyan officials from passing their own laws or rules that interfere with trade in plastic waste. Trying to hide their ugliness, the plastic profiteers created a PR front group called Alliance to End Public Waste. But hello, it's not public waste. Exxon and other funders of the alliance make, promote, and profit from the mountains of destructive trash they now demand we clean up. This is Jim Hightower saying the real problem is not waste, but plastic itself. Rather than subsidizing more of the stuff, we should seek out and encourage people who are developing real solutions and alternatives.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Carmelita Torres led the Bath riots at the El Paso-Juarez border. Mexican workers traveled daily across the Santa Fe Bridge from Juarez, Mexico, into El Paso, Texas for work. As a condition of entry, workers were required to strip naked and be sprayed with a toxic mixture of chemicals. U.S. health officials insisted they were trying to stop the spread of typhus through this type of delousing campaign. However, they were just as motivated by racist typecasting of Mexicans as dirty. David Dorado Romo, author of Ringside to a Revolution, tells the story of 17-year-old Carmelita Torres. Amid rumors that health workers secretly photographed and then distributed photos of the naked women as they were being sprayed, Carmelita crossed into El Paso every day where she worked as a maid. But on this day, instead of stripping down, she refused fumigation and convinced the other women to demonstrate with her against this humiliating daily procedure. Within an hour, she and 200 other women had blocked all traffic coming into El Paso. Newspaper reports claimed several thousand protesters by the end of the day. The women marched to the disinfection camp, hoping to convince those undergoing disinfection to join them. When health officials tried to disperse the crowd, they were met with rocks and bottles. The women then laid down on the trolley tracks to stop the delivery of more workers and wrestled with motormen for control of the cars. The riots lasted for 3 days, but the spraying of Mexican workers with DDT and other toxic chemicals continued for more than 40 years. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Thursday, January 28th, 2021. I'm Mark Boulanger. As the effects of COVID-19 hit workplaces last year, almost 10% of global working hours were lost, the equivalent of 255 million full-time jobs. The depressing job figures are included in the latest edition of the ILO Monitor. The ILO is the UN specialized agency focused on matters of work in the world. It is headed by a trade unionist, Guy Ryder. Mr. Ryder, the Director General of the ILO, presented the results of the Monitor survey in an online media conference.
Let's look at the perspectives that are ahead of us for the year. Well, I'm pleased to say there is some relatively good news in all of this, that we do see tentative signs of recovery. These signs are fragile, they are uncertain, and the prospects are notably uneven. But this said, with the right policies and actions, we can build upon these, and this is what we have to do. Now, our monitor sets out three theoretical scenarios, not predictions, but scenarios for the year ahead. A baseline scenario, a more pessimistic one, and the optimistic one. Let me start with the baseline scenario. And this projects that global working hours losses in 2021 would stand at 3%. That's 3% again compared to the last quarter of 2019, the pre-pandemic quarter. And that is equivalent to the loss, that 3%, of 87 million full-time jobs. And in this scenario, the strongest recovery is projected to occur in the lower middle income countries. Higher and upper middle income countries would face a difficult first quarter, but their recovery would strengthen in the second half of the year as the effects of vaccination programs kick in increasingly. The pessimistic scenario, and this assumes a pandemic will have a more lingering effect, with shortfalls in fiscal stimulus, slow progress on vaccinations, and poor consumer and business confidence. In this pessimistic scenario, working hour losses would remain high at 4.6%, again against that baseline of the last quarter of 2019, and that would be the equivalent to the loss of 131 million full-time jobs. And the third scenario, the optimistic scenario, assumes that the pandemic is under control and that consumer and business confidence is good. But even in this case, we expect global working hour losses will continue throughout 2021, with a gap of 1.3% compared to the end of 2019. And that corresponds to 36 million full-time jobs. And in the Americas, Europe, and Central Asia, those losses would be somewhat higher, around 2%. So I suppose the question we must ask ourselves is which path is most likely to be followed. As I've noted, all scenarios project that working hour losses will continue. In other words, that financial and social distress for millions of people will continue through 2021 and beyond that. And we must also remember that no country, no sector can recover alone. Apparent improvement in one industry or one area alone would be a false dawn. So, as we frequently hear, we truly are all in this together, and the only sustainable route out of the crisis is together. And it follows, therefore, that for recovery processes to be effective, they really have to be human-centered.
The ILO's monitor on the effect of COVID-19 on the global workforce can be found at the organization's website at ilo.org. And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts at radiolabor.net. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit. A mix of rain and snow. We are expecting to be much cooler than yesterday, barely breaking 40 degrees. We may get to 40 degrees. Winds will be light and variable, and we're expecting, with this mix of rain and snow, it's going to be mostly rain for most of the day. Expecting somewhere around 1/4 of an inch, and occasional rain showers throughout. Cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-30s, winds light and variable, a bit of drying out. I wouldn't say drying out. We're not expecting to have copious amounts of precipitation falling from the sky tomorrow. Highs should be in the mid-40s with winds light and variable. Though we do have quite a bit of rain coming, on Saturday throughout to the middle of the week. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 7,267, with 98 deceased, an increase of 1 overnight. These are sad stories, and they are sad also because they are vast undercounts, and we all know that. Pollen here right at Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index in the region is good at 20 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.69 inches. Visibility is at 1 mile. And relative humidity is at 100%. We're swimming, folks. We're swimming. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowdsourced weather station, Crowdsourcing. And these crowds come from around the world. London is... Where are you? London is 55 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 56 and cloudy. Rome is 52 and fair. Kyiv is 31 with light snow. Kabul is 34 with winter smoke. Hong Kong is 59 and clear. Tokyo is 38 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 67 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and cloudy, and they had a lot of weather in the Northern California part of California, and we had the edge of it too. And New York is 30 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowdsourced group of crowds, and they sourced their weather stations in a crowdsourced manner. And these crowds come from around the world. Maria Smetkova of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Anti-Kremlin protester Philip Kuznetsov was detained in Moscow on Saturday and found guilty by a court on Monday of taking part in an illegal protest. But it was only late on Wednesday that the authorities were able to find a jail cell for him after arresting what one monitoring group said was a record number of protesters at weekend rallies demanding Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny be freed from jail. Moscow police appeared to be struggling to find enough space in detention facilities. Well, I think they could send them to, I don't know, don't they have gulags left? They should build them then, maybe. No, don't give them any ideas. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets across Russia to demand the release of Navalny on Saturday, who was arrested at a Moscow airport this month after flying home for the first time since being poisoned with a nerve agent, conveniently poisoned. And everybody knows when someone's conveniently poisoned, or conveniently falls out of a 5-story window, or is conveniently mugged, conveniently, just dies. You know, that convenience is done by Vlad. Kuznetsov, a 28-year-old entrepreneur, was arrested Saturday near the prison housing Navalny. A court on Monday sentenced him to 10 days in jail for taking part in the protests, deemed illegal because they had not been pre-sanctioned by authorities. He had messaged later on Wednesday to say the police had eventually found a prison for him after driving from jail to jail for more than 16 hours. The Moscow Police Department did not respond to a request for comment.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jonathan Stemple of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. An Iraqi-born British national has been criminally charged in New Jersey with involvement in a bribery scheme to obtain millions of dollars of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reconstruction contracts in Iraq. The defendant, Shwan Al-Mullah, and his co-conspirators received confidential info to get an edge in the bidding bidding process for the contracts in exchange for more than $1 million in bribes paid from 2007 to 2009. Al-Mullah, age 60, owner of Baghdad-based Iraqi Consultants in Construction, was charged with 7 counts of honest services wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit bribery. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.